Well, today we are continuing a series that we started a few weeks ago called Fixer Upper. And this is a series all about how you and I, each and every one of us, have destroyed our relationship with God at some point, but how God is constantly on the verge of and trying to restore that relationship with us. All of us, not just some of us, not just the best among us, not the ones who act right all the time, not the ones who do all the right things and say all the right things, not the ones with all the money who look this way or look that way, who live in this place or that place, but all of us. God is doing whatever it takes to restore the relationship between us. And like an old fixer-upper house that maybe has become dilapidated over time because there's a pipe bust and nobody ever fixed it, or because there's some shutters that needed fixing, floorboards that have rotted away, whatever it is, things that have shifted around. A lot of people will look at these houses and go, well, let's just bulldoze it, let's tear it down. But sometimes you come across those houses that are fixer-uppers. You can just work on them and make things work again. In the same way, God is interested in restoring our relationship with God. And in order to do that, we talked about how God had to provide a redeemer, someone who could bring us back, someone who could buy us back or win us back, often at great cost to themselves. God had to provide a redeemer for us. And what we said was, it becomes very obvious through logic that the only redeemer, the only possible redeemer is Jesus. Now, when we say that, that's a big statement. Like that's a really big thing to say. That's a claim to a grand narrative that maybe can make some of us a little bit squeamish in the 21st century America we live in, but it is true. There is only one Redeemer. There's the way, the truth, the life, and his name is Jesus. And if he's the only one, then there must be something unique about him. And so we're forced to ask the question, what sort of Redeemer is needed? Well, the answer is one who is truly human and also truly God. We talked about this for a while last week. We said this Redeemer had to be human in order to empathize with us and understand what it is we go through. Because if this Redeemer wasn't human, then they couldn't pay the penalty for human sin. They had to be one of us. They had to be somebody who could literally show us the way. As I was trying to point this out last week, I told a story. I gave an illustration of us being lost in the wilderness, kind of maybe in a jungle type wilderness, and it's so thick and you can't figure out how to navigate your way out. You even have a map, but the map just leads you to this giant chasm that in between where you are and where you want to go. And you're like, while you're sitting there trying to figure out how am I going to get where I need to go, suddenly Jesus appears. And Jesus has this machete and he starts taking us through all these places and we follow him from the wilderness jungle into the promised land. That's the idea, because he's one of us. We can follow him and go where he goes. As I was doing this last week, one of my friends who will remain nameless decided to stop listening and decided to play around with AI art on ChatGPT. And he sent me this. I call this Machete Jesus. This is my kind of Jesus, right? Got a giant machete, got some maybe blood on it. I imagine it's boa constrictor blood, but that's me. All right, and obviously never skips the gym, never misses arm day, does curls every day. That's Machete Jesus, right? Now this Jesus, this Jesus, this Redeemer is truly human. And that should be enough a lot of times, right? Like if he's showing us the way, shouldn't that be enough? Shouldn't his good teachings, shouldn't his wise words be enough to bring me back? Why didn't Jesus just show me what to, just tell me what to do, and I'm supposed to do that? Because the next question we have is, well then, why must the Redeemer be truly God? We talked about the human side. Why must the Redeemer be truly God? Now, if this sounds a little bit academic for you, if you feel like, why are we getting so deep into these weeds on a Sunday morning and talking about stuff that should be in theology books, if it sounds academic, let me say this to you. It's also really academic to go to the moon. Some of you are conspiracy theorists and you're like, we never went to the moon, man. But if we were to, anytime you shoot a rocket off into the sky, there's a lot of academic work behind it. Would we agree? Anytime you put a plane into the sky, you got 400 people riding on a plane, there's some academic work behind it. You're driving in a car, academic work behind it. All of these things that are necessary and good in our lives have academic work behind it. The same is true with our faith. You know what happens if we didn't have the academic work behind, like setting a rocket off into the sky? It'd be a lot like when me and my buddies got together a few times in my life at certain points, maybe last year on New Year's. And we just took these fireworks that we had and said, you know what we should do? Let's light them all on fire together at the same time and see what happens. You know what happens? Something else catches on fire and somebody gets a little hurt. It's the same thing with our faith. If there's no academic work behind it, something else catches on fire and somebody gets a little hurt sometimes. That's why it's important. One of my concerns that I have in recent history, watching the way our faith goes, is it's based a lot on feeling. And I'm not just talking about people in our church. I'm talking about churches I've served in, places I've gone, people I listen to and see online like you do. A lot of it's based on feeling. And I don't think you can separate or divorce feeling from and emotion from faith, but it can't be all based on emotion and feeling, can it? Because one day things are going to get difficult. One day you're going to be asked a question from somebody who doesn't believe like you. You're going to be asked a difficult question from somebody in this unbelieving world that you can't answer, and it's going to rock your faith. And someday you're going to get a diagnosis that you're not ready for. Maybe not even your own. Maybe it's somebody else's that you love. And it's going to rock your faith. And when those times come, you can't fall back on feeling. You have to fall back on substance that allows you to come up with an answer for that question that arises. And so this morning, we're not just talking about academic stuff. We're talking about truth. We're talking about eternal truth that has an everlasting purpose in your life. In the ancient world, the high priest's role was paramount. They were literally the one who brought mercy to God's people on behalf of God. And they brought God's people's sacrifices to God on behalf of the people. Their role was paramount. And what they would do is they would go once a year into this most holy place, and they would provide the sacrifice on behalf of the Israelite people. And they would confess the sins of the Israelite people and their own sins. They would do all of this, and then God would extend mercy. They had to have this person. This was the high priest. Well, we're told from the first Christians that Jesus was our high priest. We see this, that Jesus is our high priest. He's the one who brings mercy to us. We call this atonement. But Jesus is the one who spreads mercy over us, over all our sins. And here's the thing. Every single one of us, because we have rejected or ignored God at some point in our life, when we destroyed that relationship with God, we needed that mercy. Jesus provides that mercy for us. He is our great high priest. But you know what the annoying thing is about all humans, including these high priests? They die. Every single one of us, even the best among us, they die. And you can't be mad at them for it. It happens to all of us. It's inconvenient a lot of times, and you're left with a lot of grief and a lot of sadness, and you got to work your way through that. And maybe you find a friend to talk to for an extended period of time. You come and you talk to your group. Maybe you get a counselor for a period of time. You read some books, whatever. You work your way through all of that. But nonetheless, people die. It's what we do as humans, including these high priests. And the earliest Christians understood all that. And so they even talked about it. They wrote it down and said this: now there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing in office, right? So they're humans. They're going to die. We have to have another one next year. We have to have another one next year. Even if they didn't die, they'd have to get a new priest at some point to come in and provide a new sacrifice, because even after they provided the sacrifices for everybody's sins on the Day of Atonement, like later on that day, they're going to sin again. But we have a better high priest. But because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. He lives forever. So you see the distinction that he's making, right? That this writer is making between the high priests who are human and they die all the time, like eventually they're going to die, and then Jesus, our high priest, who lives forever, who is constantly there. Now, he lives forever because he was resurrected from the dead. Also different between Jesus and the other high priest. He was resurrected from the dead because he was God, and also as a human, he lived a perfect and sinless life. He was different than everybody else. He was resurrected from the dead because of it. Death had no claim to him. He couldn't stay dead because of his sinless and his perfect life. And because of that, he has a permanent priesthood that never ends. This last week, we got to celebrate the church's 98th birthday, which is a really cool thing to do. I mean, you think about how many churches, I don't know if you spend much time looking into this, probably not a lot. But let me just tell you that a lot of churches don't last beyond 5 years after they're planted. And even more, not 10 years after. And a lot of the churches that were planted and started 98 years ago have since folded, especially within the last 30-ish years. It's a really cool thing to still be around. And so this last week, we got to celebrate our church turning 98. Our official 98th birthday was on this past Wednesday. And on Wednesdays around here, we have a traditional service. So if you're really into hymns and piano and organ and choir, like this is a great service for you to attend. You should come sometime if you're into it. It's at 6:15 on Wednesday nights. And so we spent some time that night thinking about the history and celebrating it. And then we went into the fellowship hall that we have here, and we had a lot of cake, like the biggest slices of cake you've ever seen in your life. They were this tall. I'm not kidding you. They were huge. That's all I remember. No, they're huge. And also there was this great display out of memorabilia from 98 years of church history. And on this table there were these 10 pictures spread across. And one of the teenagers had come over to eat some of this large amount of cake with us. And they came over to me and they said, "Pastor Josh, who are all those old guys?" And I said, "Well, those are all the pastors of the church in the history of the church." And they said, "Where's your picture?" And I said, "I don't know. I just never go take one. I don't want to go do it." And they said, well, who are all these people? I said, that's this guy. He served here. He did this. He did this. And like you can see this written up thing here. I want to show you a picture of one of them. This guy right here. His name is Monroe Smock. An interesting man. If you were to Google P. Monroe Smock, a very interesting man. He's what I call the first real pastor of this church. He became the pastor in about 1930 here in church and served for 10 years. So all throughout the 30s. He was technically the third pastor of the church, but the two before him only lasted like 10 months at a time, 9 months, something like that. And then they left. And here's this guy. He comes and he serves sight unseen. He takes the church. He's coming from the Northwest, and he communicates via telegram and says, "Yeah, I accept. I'll be there in 2 weeks." And he shows up and he leads this church through the 30s. You remember what happened in the 30s? A little thing called the Great Depression led all throughout this stuff. He did such an amazing job. He got this church stabilized on solid footing. And then he left and went to go do something else. And you know what else he did after that? He died. Spoiler alert. All humans pass away at some point. Death becomes a part of life. The first century Jews, especially those ones that are being written to in this letter to the Hebrews here, they understood this was the way it went down. They understood that their high priests were going to die and that they were going to have to get a new high priest, much in the same way that you understand that one day the pastor you have is not going to be the pastor anymore, whether they move on or they die someday. I said, and I will die too. Unless I get really rich, and there's a lot of advances in scientific stuff right now. Don't see it happening though. I will probably die too, should the Lord tarry, as they say. But we have Jesus. We have this great high priest, Jesus, who is there to be with us. That's why the writer of the letter of Hebrews goes on to say this: therefore he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. So while your pastor may be gone, while their high priests may have died, while every human you know may pass away and may be no more, may be ineffective to do things for you, now we have this high priest named Jesus who lives forever, who was resurrected from the dead, who lives forever and intercedes for you forever. If you've ever wondered, can I be forgiven? Is God going to take time to forgive me for that? The answer is yes, because Jesus is right there interceding for those who follow him, those who come to God through him. He's interceding for you now. Now, we understand why Jesus lives forever. We've talked about that. But what I want to focus on for just a moment is this word completely. It's kind of fascinating to me. This idea, completely saving us. Imagine for a moment that you owe your friend $5. Not a whole lot of money, right? Like not a whole lot of money, but like $5. And you're the type of person you say, you know what? It may not be a lot of money to me, but I'm going to pay back this money. I need to make sure I get this money. I need to be a person of integrity. I'm going to pay him back. It's been a couple weeks. You go and you say, hey, I know I owe you $5. Here's that $5. And also, just for your trouble, and because I know I wish I could have paid it back faster, here's $2 more interest. They didn't ask for interest. They were never going to ask, but they appreciate the gesture, right? You gave them this interest, whatever. So you end up giving $7 because it was a finite amount. Imagine though, instead, you owe a lot more money than $5. Imagine you owe this astronomical amount of money. And also imagine that the interest rate on that debt is astronomical too. So much so that no matter how hard you work, no matter how many people you borrowed from, no matter how many banks you robbed, you could rob every bank in the world, you would never be able to pay back this debt that you owe. You just never would, because it increases rapidly, so quickly. It's this infinite amount of debt. But you are a finite person, and you have finite resources. You need someone who can completely cover your infinite debt, which means you need someone who is infinite. Well, we find out who that is. Such a high priest, well, we're still talking about Jesus, truly meets our need. And what is our need? To have our debt paid in full, to have our debt with God paid in full. It truly meets our need. One who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted from the heavens. I want you to read, just for a moment, those words again. Read that description. This is a high priest who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. That only describes one person in the entire universe. It's God. So what we're saying is, this high priest, who we've also said is Jesus, must be God. And he's the only one who can completely cover your debt. He's the only one who has infinite resources. Jesus there is of infinite worth. And because of that, he can cover your sin. The writer goes on and says, unlike the other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people, because he's never sinned. He sacrificed for their sins, that's you and me, once for all when he offered himself. So he's not just the guy who's paying the debt, he's the payment too. Because Jesus is of infinite worth. Jesus has infinite resources to pay your infinite death and to pay your infinite debt. In Jesus, God is paying a debt that humanity owed, but apparently only God could pay. Or maybe we'll just put it like this today, the bottom line of everything today. Jesus was truly God because only God could help us. At the end of the day, only God could help you in paying the debt you owe to God. And so God had to send Jesus, the God-man, who was truly human and truly God, to pay your debt. And when you think about it, it's actually better that way. Because if you could pay, say you could save yourself, you know what I know to be true? Even if you could save yourself, you wouldn't. How many times have you said these words? Man, I'm gonna start eating better. And then you didn't. How many times have you said, I need to start exercising? And then you didn't. Maybe you were good for like a few weeks, maybe a few months, and then you weren't. Like, it didn't get any better. Now, we're just talking about like physical stuff here, like eating better, exercising. We're talking about that. And you didn't continually take care of yourself on that. You didn't do what it took. But let's talk about like your relationship with God, your closeness with God. Let's talk about your eternal relationship with God. If it was left up to you, you'd have all the best intentions in the world, but you still wouldn't do it. Luckily, you have a great high priest who is always interceding for you, one who's always working on your behalf. And even when you fall short and you fail, is always drawing you back, not through fear, not through condemnation, but always drawing you back out of love and grace. I was talking to some of my friends this morning about this. I said, for me, it's a lot like with my kids. I love my kids so much. But the truth is, I'm an imperfect person. And because I'm an imperfect person, I'm also an imperfect dad. And I do things wrong. And I say the wrong things. And I have the wrong attitude. And I use the wrong tone. I know you can't believe it at all. But it happens. And in those moments, I could totally ignore it. I could just move on, because what are my kids going to say to me? What are they going to say to me? Daddy, you're not very nice. You should go to timeout. Okay, yeah. Please let me go to timeout. You guys stay over there. I'll be over here. But when I do them wrong, when I say something wrong to them, or when I say it in the wrong way, when I sin against them, I feel it. I feel it right here. And what I know is true is you've done that too. You felt that too. Maybe it wasn't with your kids. Maybe it was somebody else, but like you felt that too. I feel it right here, and I want to make it right because I love them. It's the same with Jesus. Because I love Jesus, and I'm grateful for his presence in my life, and I'm grateful that he's my high priest. I'm grateful for what he's done for me. When I sin against him, when I do things that he wouldn't want me to do, I feel it right here. I don't walk around with guilt and shame. I'm not shackled by that stuff. I walk around in freedom, baby. But because I love Jesus, I want to make it right instantly. That's where we got to get. My prayer for you is that you'll live in freedom. My prayer for you is that you won't walk around in guilt and shame, always trying to make this about you. Because when you make it about you, you walk around in guilt and shame. When you try to earn your way to God, when you try to prove that you're perfect enough, that you're a good enough person, when you try to say, well, I did my Bible study 3 out of 7 days this week, that should be good enough. I gave enough money to the church, well, that should be good enough. I didn't say but like 7 cuss words all week, that should be good. No, it ain't about what you can do. It's about what Jesus has already done. And if you'll trust that he is truly human and truly God and truly interceding for you, oh man, you can live in real freedom. I want you to live that way. I want you to have that peace. I want you to have that joy of walking that way that comes from loving Jesus and letting him be the king of your life. So here's what it means to you for Jesus to be truly God. It means that he's always there. He's always showing up, working on your behalf, even when you're not. Let me pray for you. God, I thank you for today. And I thank you for this group here and those who are listening online. I lift them up to you and I ask, God, that you would help us all, every single one of us, to understand what it is you have done for us. Thank you for sending Jesus, who's truly God and truly human, to do for us what we could never do for ourselves. Lord, thank you that because Jesus lives forever, His mercy and His work for us never end. Help us to trust in Him completely and live in the grace He has given us. It's in His name we pray. Amen.